So flip and advanced rotation. So you can do most things in effects controls, like we've used so many times. We know how to rotate. We have the clip selected, and then we just use the rotation to move it around. However, the advanced bit of rotation to draw your attention to is that you don't necessarily have to be rotating around the center. If we highlight motions, we highlight our boundaries. Obviously, we've got our anchor point. We've talked about that before in an earlier section. But what you can do is you can move this anchor point anywhere that you like, say up here, and you can rotate around that anchor point. See how it's rotating from around here. All the footage, by the way, in this section is from Motion Array. Don't forget, there's a link in your worksheet to be able to get to them. And yeah, I can't believe how much stuff they have here. I mean, literally, they've got footage on anything, not just video, but photo. And yeah, you know the deal with Motion Array. So so that's how you rotate around another point that's not necessarily center. Now, if I click out, you can still rotate around, but you just can't see where that anchor point is. If we want to reset everything, as we know, just reset and reset everything. That's actually reset all the way down to the bottom because our anchor point is kind of still not on. So let's reset everything. Well done, Adam. Good. So that's how to rotate around somewhere that's not necessarily center. Now let's say that we want to actually rotate this because we want to level the horizon. As you can see, the horizon isn't there, or it's not level. So how do we make sure that we know what level is? Well, remember, we've got our safeguard, the safe boundaries here, and actually we could use that, but there's a way to get it a little bit cleaner. We have these show guides. Remember, if these aren't showing up, you go up to here and you can drag down what you need. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to drag down show rulers for this section, and actually that should always really be on there because it's brilliant. So if I show my guides, I actually have set up these guides, but if they're not there for you, if you show rulers, let me just drag these out. You'll probably be able to tell now how to do that in reverse. And quite often I use this to absolutely dial in the very center of a screen. And the way in which I do this is I bring on my safe guides, and because I've got rulers on here, I bring up my mouse. This originally started in Photoshop. This has only been brought into Premiere Pro of late, and it's just it's changed the game really. It helps so much. Let me just tilde this to make it a little bit bigger so you can see it properly. And if I move my mouse up into the ruler, which is the horizontal ruler or the x-axis, I can just drag down, and it drags me down a guide. Now that's come in purple, but you can change the color. I quite like a cyan color. So any guide, you just right click when you've got the mouse over and edit guide, and you can change the color, the position, and I mean, you can literally change everything. But what I like to do is I like kind of that color. We don't have to make it broadcast friendly because it's not going to be viewed anyway, and just hit OK. Good. Now we can convert that into a vertical if we want, and press OK, but it just kind of places it anywhere that you like. So I'm going to drag that there. Go on. I wish it'd snap, but it doesn't. I just bring that into center. So that gives me my absolute center point, but that doesn't help this because we're looking down here. We can either drag another guide down, or we can just drag this one down where we want it. So that's the top of the horizon. That's the bottom of the horizon. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get somewhere near the middle, tilde it out, and with the clip selected, I'm just going to use the rotation and drag it one way or the other to get that level. That looks kind of, no it doesn't. Let's have a look. If I move the guide around, I've got to kind of allow for kind of like shrubbery and all that, but that's definitely a much more level horizon. Is it? Not quite. So I'm going to use the anchor point, and if I highlight motion, my anchor point, I'm going to grab the anchor point and I'm going to place that right here. Now if I tilde it in and see, you can see that that's pretty much on the horizon. It's a little bit lower, but I now want to rotate around this anchor point. So if I tilde back out again and now rotate, as you can see, I'm rotating around there. So that will help me to dial it in, he says. It's a very, let's have a look at the numbers. We're -3. I want to go a little bit more that way, don't I? So I want to go more plus. So if I type in -3 again, that's where we were. Maybe -2, a little bit better. Maybe -2.5, bring it back a little bit, not -25, -2.5. And let's tilde it in and see. That's much more level. Let me just get rid of the guides and the boundaries for now so you can see. So what that then does is it kind of gives us, well, space where there's no footage. So what we can then do is we can use the scale. So we can either drag up on the number, or you know me, I like a slider, so we could just slide that up. But the problem is that we're scaling up from the anchor point. So what we then do is we need to move again, not remove, the anchor point. But if we reset it, it kind of ruins everything. So what we then need to do is, if we go to the safe margins again, grab that anchor point and just move it where we want to. If you hold down Control, you can snap it to center. So now we're going to size up again around center. And I want to do that because there's bits up here and there's bits down there and there's bits here. So if we size up from center and up here, actually a little bit of black there. So we'll try and fill out all that. So if we leave the boundaries on so we know exactly where those blue lines are, let's just scale up slowly. And okay, everywhere's gone apart from the top left, so just a little bit more, and there you have it. We now have a level horizon. We've got a little bit of have we got a bit of room? Very, very little. So that's there. So we've got now a nice level horizon, and for me, that's much more aesthetically pleasing than if I create another one. Remember, hold down Alt and drag to and let go of your mouse before you let go of Alt to make a new version. If we reset everything back to where it was, that, if I just trim that out so we can see them, but that is with the horizon kind of off. And as we play onto the clip below, that's with the horizon just leveled off. It's not necessarily much of a change in here. It would be in this, again, from Motion Array. You quite often get drone footage and the horizon isn't quite right. Sometimes it doesn't look quite right, but it is, sometimes with a fisheye lens or something. So what we can do is we can bring on our guides and check, and yeah, that horizon isn't quite right. You see how it's like there? The thing is, this is a moving drone shot, but because the drone is panning down with the camera and only straight down, it's not changing the yaw, which is kind of the rotation. If you tilt your head left or right, that's yaw, Y-A-W. It's not changing that, so the horizon is still off. So I'm going to drag this up to here just on this clip, and I'm going to use exactly just what we've learned. So I'm going to get the anchor point. I'm going to grab that anchor point, making sure that you're not grabbing the guide and moving that off. But no, not there. There, grab the anchor point, and I'm actually going to place that on this edge of the horizon, and then I'm just going to grab rotation and I'm going to move it to the right. Oh, that's far too much. You do have to get it kind of going a little bit, and that's only rotation. I'm going to use the numbers. Let's go rotation 2. Bring down the guide, see how that is. Yeah, that's pretty much spot on. Now you can see that because we've rotated around the anchor point and we've moved the anchor point, that's now kind of brought it down from the top. I'm going to bring that anchor point and I'm going to move it back to the center. And then I'm going to position this a little bit more. So I'm going to kind of bring it up a little bit, maybe bring it over to the left a little bit. So I've kind of I've got space that needs to be filled on all 4 sides. That kind of makes it just more equal once I then start to scale up. So we just start scaling up just ever so slightly, keep coming. There, that's enough. Get rid of the guides. And if I play that through, once again, I'm going to make a second copy and drag that back. And I'm going to reset all of these. Reset everything, even the anchor point. Yeah, and just play this through and you'll see the difference. that just, you know, that should have been done in camera, to be honest with you. The drone operator should have calibrated the gimbal, but sometimes that doesn't happen, and you don't necessarily, I'm a drone pilot as well, so sometimes you don't necessarily notice it's off until you get the footage into the computer. This again is a great case for shooting 4K footage and outputting in 1080, because we've zoomed in by about 8%, 8.3%, but you're not going to lose any quality when you're outputting in 1080 because the footage is 4K. So it's downscaling. And yeah, you won't lose any quality. Now, flip. It's kind of still within this kind of area. And there's two ways to flip. There's a quick way and there's a slow way. But if you're using and dialing numbers in, it doesn't really slow you down. So to flip this, we just want to rotate. So we could go rotate 180, boom, done. It's rotated. How about if we want to flip it horizontally? This is a vertical flip. If we want to flip it horizontally, now if we flip it horizontally, obviously the numbers are going to be kind of backwards and stuff, but let's undo that. And to flip horizontally, there's a long way and a short way. The quickest way is to go into your effects area and type flip. Now in there we do have the vertical flip. That's the quick way to just boom, done, and all that. And all it does is it doesn't actually do anything with your rotation. It actually chucks on a transform effect, which can't really be edited because that's all it does, vertical flip, and that's how it works. But if we wanted to horizontal flip, it's just as easy as the vertical flip. Now you can't really tell that much here because we're upside down, but if I undo, and sometimes redo, Control Shift Z to redo and Control Z to undo, sometimes that makes the difference, because sometimes you'll want to put a bit of text maybe down here, like a lower third, and it doesn't quite work with this because it's still a little bit busy. Well, if it's just a short clip, chuck it on a horizontal flip and you're laughing. There is a way to do this manually with regards to uniform scale, but if I toggle off uniform scale, you'll see we're starting to play 50 height and 100 width, and the aspect ratio isn't kept. In After Effects, it does it obeys a slightly different law. It doesn't really work in Premiere Pro. So I'm not even going to take you down that path. So what I want to show you now is it's kind of within the same paradigm, as it were, of rotation and flipping, but it's actually how to show maybe like a screen recording in a little bit of a better way. And to do this, I'm going to drag in a bit of footage from a client video I've done quite recently. And this is just a standard screen recording. And this was kind of showing his bottle shop. He does private wine tastings. He also has a bottle shop. So I'm going to set in on there and maybe just, okay, let's take it back a little bit while I was scrolling and out. I'm going to drag in that footage. Cool. So what I'm going to do is, first and foremost, I've got a little bit around the edges that I don't really want in. I could crop these, but the easy way to do it would be to scale up until that's hidden. Good. Happy with that? Maybe bring it up a little bit so I don't have that white at the top. Good. That'll do. And I'm going to nest this first. And the reason why I'm going to nest it is because, as you see, the position is different than standard. It should be 965/40. The scale is different, 90.5. And I want to kind of start with standardized, so 100% scale and 960 by 540. So if I nest it, press N on the keyboard and hit OK. I'm not going to rename it. If I highlight it again, we're back to 960 by 540. And if I move this round, that's the only bit I've got. If I scale it down, so it's kind of like baked in. In After Effects, it's referred to as a pre-comp or a pre-composition. But that's kind of what we're doing. We've pre-composed it. We've nested this, so it works like that. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back over to my effects, and I'm going to go to it's actually a 3D effect, but we've used it before, and I'm going to drop on basic 3D. Now what does that do? Well, we've seen before with text, we've got tilt and swivel and all that, and distance to image, and that's what we're going to play with. So if I take a bit of distance and pull that out. Ignore the black around here at the moment. We're going to change that. And if I tilt, I'm going to tilt it forward. No, I'm going to tilt it back a little bit and maybe put a bit of a swivel on it. So we kind of give it a bit of perspective. Good. Happy with that so far? Good. Now we're going to scale it up a little bit more, but I still have this black in the background and I kind of want a bit of space. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring that nested sequence up one. And I'm going to right click in here and create a color matte. I mean, this is personal preference, but this is kind of what I always do. I'm going to set the color matte to white, hit OK. Yeah, OK. And drag that underneath this clip and make it for the duration. So now we've got a white background rather than a black. It's just nicer. We're also going to place this in a space. But first and foremost, I'm going to add specular highlight. You see how that gives a highlight on there? And it's almost like a light is being shone on it. And you can't really tell much of a difference. If I toggle it off, you can see. But I'm going to leave that on for a reason. And I'll show you that very shortly. Now what we're going to do is we're going to keyframe this. We're going to keyframe the swivel. So if I come right back to the beginning and I'm going to set a keyframe there. And because we're 23, plus 23 degrees, I'm going to come towards the end and I'm going to, if I start affecting this, it will create a new keyframe. So I'm just going to click in here and say minus 23, hit return, and that creates a keyframe there. And as you can see, we've kind of swiveled in the opposite direction. So now if I take off the specular highlight and just play that through, looks good, that, doesn't it? And it just kind of, it gives a bit more gravitas, a bit more stuff to a basic screen recording. Now, if I add that specular highlight and play that back through, you'll see that as we move, this specular highlight moves across and it kind of gives the impression that we're looking at a monitor and it's actually in the 3D space. Final thing that I would do is I would add a drop shadow. So grab this drop shadow on here. You see how the drop shadow has kind of been, if I toggle it off and on, you'll see, if you look down in this corner here, toggle it on and off, it's there. So I'm just going to take the opacity all the way up to 100. I'm then going to move it a little bit away to start off with and see how that works, and then going to blur it out. Yeah, I'm quite happy with that. So if we play that back now, we've got the specular highlight. You see how the shadow is down here as well? So we've got a specular highlight on here. We've got a drop shadow on here, giving it more of a presence in whatever space it is. It's obviously on a white background. And if I hit play back through, that shadow moves with it. Specular highlight runs past. And as we come back round, you've got the shadow on here. It just makes it much nicer, as opposed to just a basic. If I go back into the nest, because nothing's been changed within the nest, just if that was playing, that's just a boring screen recording. Whereas this, it just, it gives it much more gravitas, much more feel. So that's your basic 3D within Premiere Pro. We've done a vertical flip, and we've also rotated around to make sure that our horizons are level. Much nicer.